All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Kamal. I am your host today, the VP of Marketing at Mine. And happy to thank you for joining us today. Happy to have you. We'll wait just a couple of minutes. Feel free to get comfortable, get your water bottle and everything. I will just wait for everybody to join us today here, maybe a minute or two. Thank you. All right, let's kick it off. Great. Again, my name is Kamal. Thank you for joining us, everybody. Today, we have an incredible session for you. We're back to our scheduled webinars where we have our customers really tell their stories. And something that we really thought comes up often in customer conversations is this talk track that we've been out, for the last couple of webinars, the business impact, towards privacy and how these two factors play together. The last webinar we had a week or so ago was all about the cost of privacy. We had an internal conversation. Highly recommend you going back. We talked about all these different statistics and how really privacy can impact business and vice versa. And today we really wanted a customer of ours, and someone that, for myself, I don't enjoy any privacy conversations more than speaking with him. Someone that really scaled the privacy program and their company. And as the company was going through incredible growth, Nick was going through some of the pain points that you probably will relate to throughout this conversation. And we really wanted to have Nick, tell their story and how compliance can be actually something beneficiary to the business and not hindering it. So Nick, thank you for joining us today. Super happy to have you.
Great to be here. Thanks a lot. I love to tell stories about Ardoq.
Love it. Great. So a little bit, about us. I'm just trying to. Here we go. Great. So the agenda is very simple. We'll just talk about, growing your business within your privacy program. And please feel free to ask your questions. We'll hit them as we go through the conversation here. A little bit about us before jumping in. If you're not familiar with MineOS, the company started now almost 4 years ago, headquartered in Tel Aviv. We have our operations all over the world now, with focus on the EU, the UK, and the US. And really, we built a company to focus on compliance and security and a lot of the topics that Nick will dive into from day one. We're very proud about, the team that we've assembled together from a lot of enterprise companies. Our advisory board is someone that we speak with on every day, and they've been advising us on building this, company together. Again, we're also very proud about the investors that, put their faith and their money, behind this company. We are also the #1 customer-rated privacy platform. Companies, as you see here, Ardoq and others, very fortunate to have them. Very grateful for the reviews and the love that they give us, to make us the #1 customer privacy platform. With that said, Nick, I want to give you the platform to hear from you more than me. That's what people are here for. Please give us a little bit of introduction about yourself and the company you work for.
Absolutely, yeah. So Ardoq, we're in the B2B SaaS space as well. We serve enterprise architects trying to make sure that they have really clear understanding of their total app portfolio, their risk appetite, their processes, their people, so that it's absolutely clear for the decision makers to have a lot of confidence when they say, oh yes, we've done the analysis and we see that we can kind of phase out certain applications, or there's a lot of potential in improving a certain process, or we're ready for cloud transformation after a lot of years of being on premise. Mm-hmm. That's what we do. We're very data driven. And so that's where a lot of my kind of stories come from. Me personally, I am an American living in Norway. Ardoq is a Norwegian company. This is my fourth tech startup. So I've been kind of just around this space for 20 years trying to build something that really scales. And so this scale that we've seen at Ardoq has been an incredible journey, doing 20x in ARR since I joined 5 years ago, and 10x
Wow.
in employees. So that's the kind of journey that we all kind of go into starting companies with. And to actually be on the ride has been incredible, and it's been great to be a part of that team. And so when I joined, we were 20 people, and now we're over 200. And so just taking on a lot of those operational tasks. How do we have a privacy program? How do we tell our customers about it? How do we make sure that we're not putting ourselves at compliance risk? Is just one of the small parts of the things that I've been working on, from finance, legal, HR, IT, just kind of the explosion of everything a company needs. So I look forward to telling the story about the privacy piece of that very grand story.
Great. And congratulations for the incredible growth very quickly. Something just really to envy and to be very proud of. Congratulations for that, and to the Ardoq team. Let's dive into it. So, when we chat, Nick, you bring up really these different stages of growth all the time. You spoke a little bit about it high level, but let's dig in. The beginning, starting the startup, growing, keeping as the company and the founders are all worried about building the business and, putting this rocket ship together. You are thinking as a, operations and compliance and privacy, you have your own worries that could hinder that. So we'll talk about that. Comes in the expansion and, a little bit of that growth. Now you have maybe a product market fit. We'll talk about that a little bit. And then comes maybe that high growth and a little bit of the hockey stick maturity, scaling the company in the program. And finally, you've made it. You are now a leader. You're in your space and you're, top of your category. Obviously, the needs from you probably have been different throughout all these different stages. So let's dive into it. How do you view, that beginning, and how do you keep privacy and compliance a priority for the company?
Yeah, so my story is that I joined Ardoq right at the time that they'd spent a lot of time just trying to get the product up and running. It's very complex. It's a big space. And so I'd come from being a co-founder at another company. And so I was used to doing the commercial side, the product side, and the admin side. And so I came in and said, hey, you guys are so distracted with the commercial and the product side, you're forgetting about what Ardoq is going to be for our investors, for our employees, and this trust that we needed from our customers. So let me take that one third of what I used to do. I thought it was going to be not too difficult. It is very difficult. So in that initial stage, it was very much about saying, all right, this is 2018. We know that GDPR is about to come out. There's a lot of unknowns around how we're going to treat privacy. A lot of consulting firms, law firms are trying to take that first tackle at it. Is like, here's how we translate this new law into some step-by-step stuff. Very document-based, and hearing stories about just these massive teams trying to get a general hold on it at bigger companies. And I had the different take on it as a startup with 20 people. There's no way we're going to match that kind of privacy push that we're seeing with manual processes and big teams that we see coming in from the big companies in Europe. So let's tackle it from a data perspective. So what we did was we broke down what GDPR means into our own framework, so we could be super clear on what the data is, and then very systematically going around and talking to people about what processes they do, logging it, and just kind of getting that very first level up, so that when the GDPR law went live, we were very concerned about reputational damage, where, oops, we're going to be the first ones to get a fine. We're going to be the ones that are on the front page of the newspaper for not doing this well. So we took it very seriously. And then you start to realize that, the intention of the law is to go after the Facebooks and the Googles of the world, and we're not even on the radar yet. So we're really proud of what we did to get that startup as GDPR came live with 20 people. And then the challenges start to come with keeping it updated and being a part of a high growth company. You're never just set with your processes. You're always changing them and changing the data flows that you want to do. And that becomes then another challenge to do as you try to expand.
Yeah, makes sense. And a question come up here. You talked about building that trusted relationship with customers. As a small company, just kicking things off, and very interesting timing with GDPR at that point. Do you feel that you talked about kind of like targeting these large companies? How do you feel like how would you prioritize privacy and ensuring to your management team to making it continuously a priority and say you know what, even though we're a small fish, if you will, we got to keep this a priority for the team. Let's double click on that, please.
Yeah. So in these procurement processes where we're saying, trust us, buy our system, we are going to take, we're going to follow the law, we're going to follow regulations. And this privacy bit has become very hot topic in Europe. So we put a lot of effort into getting a data protection agreement addendum really clear and front and center when we go into these processes. It's not an afterthought. It's not something that's generic. It's something that says, this is really what we want to do together, sign this. And that kind of starts that moment of trust to say, all right, we're going to treat your data like this. This is how you have control. And these are the things that we won't do unless you tell us to do them. And so that really helped build trust early on, especially because we came across as more sophisticated on that in the early days. We were buying systems at the same time, of course, and we're always shocked at how bad their DPAs were and how that made us have questions about their ability to follow through. So that really helped build trust. And then, of course, then the compliance piece of it to say, okay, this is how we treat your data. Here's how we can show you that records are processing. Here's how we can make you confident that we're not going to make any changes unless we warn you in advance, and that's going to become a part of the buyer's risk profile.
Yeah, makes sense. Amazing, great. Let's jump into stage 2. And so now you've built some of that structure and some of these processes that you've talked about. The company is based in Norway. And now you're kicking things off. You have maybe more market access, more global reach. You have more partners. Your investors are behind you, trying to just knock and keep growing this thing. How did your priorities change and the things that you had to focus on?
Yeah, so then we quickly expanded to the United States after absorbing GDPR. Okay, with the rest of the world, here we go, making that become a very normal thing in the EU. But then finding out that it actually had a nice halo effect on our American business, where when we're competing with American-based companies who don't have these documents and these proof points around privacy, it is just another signal that says how serious we are. We're small, yes, but we have these frameworks in the EU that even though your data is not in the EU, it's just a great moment in that trust building process to say, we're happy to be clear with you about this data protection agreement so that, you can be confident as well with what we're going to do with your data. The other thing is that you go in the United States, you get some traction, you realize that just this, the cleanliness of your ability to prove your point that you're a trustworthy company, that all helps. And then when you go to investors, we were doing an investment round every year during that process, and talking mostly with EU investors. And so when you go through the due diligence checklist, privacy is always one of the key points. And because of the fines that are out there, if all of a sudden that could be a really big red flag. If you've been a little bit cowboy, you've been going on the edge of what it can be. You're in the news for being reported to the data protection authorities. All that stuff became really sensitive in those discussions with investors. So it goes back to kind of the data problem, is that we understand the framework. We're able to say exactly what we do. We get that into our contracts very clearly, so that when investors come in and say, hey, do you have data protection agreements with all of your customers? Yes, absolutely. Here's how that works. It really just makes everything much smoother to get through those funding rounds, especially when you're in those kind of uncertain moments on the capital journey, where maybe you haven't quite hit your growth goals, or you just had an amazing quarter and you want to close the deal fast to make sure that you have the runway that you need. All of that diligence actually matters once someone's ready to write you a check. Everyone's super excited about your market size. Everyone's super excited about your growth numbers, but they're actually going to write the check. They're looking into the details of your paperwork, and privacy always comes up.
Wow. Yeah. It sounds like the structure that you built from the beginning kept serving you, whether you were entering, a new market, raising a new round, that blueprint that you had was important. Do you feel, maybe, and this question really applies to now as you enter new markets, how much, like, what are the steps that you take when you look at a new market, different regulations, and say, like, these are the things that we have to do? Do you have some sort of a blueprint and you look, differentially into, what, this market is fairly similar to GDPR, to the US. These are the required tasks. How do you go about discovering that new market and the regulations that come with it?
Yeah, it became another key thing to look at before we go anywhere. And so going to the United States, there was a lot of, maybe we'll do something like GDPR. California goes first, but, it's actually doesn't really apply to companies of our size. And so then you're always kind of thinking, well, the United States isn't just one federal entity, it is all these 50 states. And so that kind of adds a nuance, even where you're located starts to matter on what you're required to do. So that became a key thing on the checklist. We looked at the Brazilian market, saying, oh, they've also kind of had a bit of a copycat GDPR law. Maybe that will also help us get access to that market because we can prove these things. But it turns out that the market wasn't ripe for our tool as a whole. So nice privacy thumbs up, but they weren't mature enough to actually start to buy our tool. So it's definitely become a thing that we look at closely as we enter new markets. And then there's the, from Germany also is a thing where they're very sensitive to data privacy. And so they go all the way down to like the community or the county or city level. And that adds a whole nother layer of complexity that you have to be aware of as you're entering markets.
Amazing, amazing. I love that you are talking about kind of like the business value of that market, and you're kind of comparing that and making compliance within that market, part of that proposition, whether we want to enter that market or not. You're in that business conversation, and that's important. How do you involve yourself, with that business conversation, and to say, like, compliance should be part of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple that those mistakes entering markets when you're not ready become company killers. And so when we always had this kind of mantra in this stage is, we're obviously a high growth company. We are taking risks out there, but we will not take these risks with company killers. And overspending to break into a market where you're also adding compliance risk is it's a potential company killer. And so I would have that mantra. I understand it looks good on the surface. We haven't gone deep enough. This is a company killing kind of issue. That perks everyone's ears up. It's not just, hey, you're holding the brakes because of some small issue. No, this is company killing issue.
Amazing. Amazing. Great. All right. Let's jump into stage 3. Now you have these processes fairly streamlined. The team, the board, the investors, all with you. They've accepted and they understood the proposition and everything that you've talked about. How do you now think kind of like not backwards or internally but externally? Did you enter a stage where you feel like, let's make compliance and privacy a competitive advantage?
Yeah, so all the stories that I've said so far are pretty much, my whole team is 3 people. So
wow.
it was definitely a let's kind of scramble this together and make sure that we're not going to kill the company. But in this maturity and scaling moment, that is when we actually built out legal, security, privacy, these expanded our DevOps team to make sure that all of these data flows and all this value that we're trying to give to our customers, we have this much deeper maturity in it, and we have these cadences. And here's exactly, it's not just whatever fire is coming up. Oh, somebody asked, but it is, oh, this is our calendar for the year. This is exactly what we're going to do, because we know to expect the fire. It's going to happen. So we don't have to just be reactive. We can start to be proactive. That took, of course, good systems. It took scaling with the right specialty skill sets. You know, in the beginning stages, you're doing a lot as generalists. And then you start to say, all right, actually, this is becoming a risk. We see a differentiator. We want to have this whole stack of stuff that is actually going to get us to higher value customers willing to pay us more money. And table stakes to get into those companies are, I don't care how big you are, you have to have this level of compliance. So that was another reason to also go out again to investors and say, whatever are the costs to grow in this first stage from $1 to $10 million in ARR, we have to expect a higher cost to actually attempt the next stage of growth. We have to have these compliance functions. We have to have these specialists. And that became another, well, why do you need it? And you attach it to the revenue, because we will not close these deals fast enough. We will not be able to keep these deals, and we will be put our reputation at risk if we don't invest in these ways.
Amazing, amazing. And so you've now talked a lot about these systems that you had to have, as part of scaling the company. We haven't talked about MineOS yet, but I'm really curious at that point, when did you start to look at utilizing a tool like MineOS?
Yeah, so as I've said, a small team of generalists building out to specialists. And so it was about a year ago that we had just, we had gone through a really big investment round where we raised $125 million. And, again, privacy was really front and center. And I started to notice that some of our homegrown ways of doing things, my capacity to follow up as necessary was starting to flag. And so that becomes a risk to the company as a whole. And so what we did was we said, okay, it's been some years since GDPR came out. All of the initial attempts at trying to make this streamlined from consulting firms or legal firms where it's all about selling hours, I was like, somebody's out there who's actually looking at this as a data problem. I swear, somebody has realized that this is a big issue. And so I start to Google it, and MineOS comes up, and I start to say, okay, I'm starting to grasp it. I get the pitch online, but since I sell software myself, I know that there's always this difference when you kind of scratch the surface, when you go deeper. And so I really said, hey, I'm interested in what you do. I like your approach. Prove it to me. Show me your tool. Let me click around it. Don't just shove another PowerPoint at me. And MineOS just killed that process. Yes, of course, we'll show it to you. Yes, of course, we'll talk through the nuances. We are proud of the data backend that we've done this to prove the point that we're not only safe and secure and private, but we're actually streamlining your business need. And I was getting overwhelmed by the manual task of going out to all my process owners, having a meeting with them, trying to remind them on what the GDPR law is, and then actually getting them to structure the descriptions of their processes in a way that can be double checked, approved, gone to the records of processing. It was such a massive time suck. The quality wasn't high enough. So that's when I was like, somebody's figured this out. Let's go find a specialized tool. And that's when I found MineOS.
Yeah, it makes sense. I love that you're focused on kind of like I want to scale my team. I want to have more bodies, more specialized than generalists. But also I want to look into the tools that can take some of those efforts away. Can you walk us through a little bit of that? How do you feel like you want to, have a tool that can automate, take off and have the team to be more efficient versus, bringing an actual human being on team?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with just that basic question is like, hey, what applications do you have? I was like, oh yeah, we thought about that one time. I think I have some emails. There's stuff that we don't use anymore, but I think it's still like we pay $20 a month for it, kind of stuff. And so just that is exhausting. And so you're like, all right, how can I automate knowing what applications I have? That's a real strong aspect of MineOS. And then you start to say, okay, well then the internet knows what Slack does. Why do I have to explain again to the privacy team internally what Slack does? Why can't we just grab that knowledge that's out there in the universe, get the quick draft up, and then tweak it to say, all right, well, we use it like this a little bit. So getting those very first steps up really quickly and putting up the mirror to the process owner and saying, I don't want you to describe the obvious to me. I want you to reflect on, is this actually accurate? And then, add the actual value to it, add the nuance, give that little extra that shows what we do with the tool. If I ask somebody, hey, I know we use Slack, but what's their total security reputation? Go read their SOC 2 report. They're not going to do that. I mean, they're like, they have a SOC 2 report. Let me move on. And so that's the kind of stuff that we get with that automated, grab the information that's already out there and apply it to the whole Mine user base instead of every single customer going and reading the same SOC 2 report to try to get a view of this.
Yeah, makes sense. Love it. Thank you. And, the focus here has been for us to empower those privacy professionals. As you said, and I didn't even know your team is that small. We're all about ensuring that they become not just a priority for the company, they show their priority on their own, using such tools. We make them as efficient as possible. Unfortunately, with everything that you mentioned and how much privacy can help the business, they're still not prioritized, within the IT department, within security, they're still not a priority, for the business. And so I completely relate to what you're saying, and it resonates, and we hear from customers all the time of how much they need a tool to help them, empower themselves and not go to IT and to security and say like, hey, I need you to do these steps. There's no independence, or at least it's very minimum to get up running with their privacy programs. Great. Let's now talk about, stage 4 and what I'm assuming where you are right now. Congratulations. You walked us through this incredible, timeline that you have. You are a leader in your space. What are some of the things that you look into now? You're the chief operating officer at this point in the company. How do you, view privacy from this position now, versus where you were now? Any changes, how do you see it? How do you speak about it internally and externally?
Yeah, we are on the Gartner Magic Quadrant, a leader, and the process to get there isn't just user reviews. I mean, it is an intense due diligence that Gartner does to try to figure this stuff out. So that regulatory leadership, that's table stakes. They go deep as well to say, that you can trust this company in this leadership space. They have the ability to execute. That has helped a lot. When it comes to the showing that we're not overspending on doing a must do, right? We want to make sure that as we grow the company, we don't want to have to add the same amount of specialists to do the next bit of growth. What we'd rather do is to try to make the specialists we have much more efficient. And so when you look at it from the budgeting perspective, it always is this kind of, are we really mature enough to need that specialist right now? But then when you get that specialist, you want to make sure that there's the systems and the culture around taking these things seriously are going to free up the rest of the organization's time to say, they got that piece, we can always rely on it. There's going to be no surprises, no fines. We can focus ourselves back on the innovation piece. There's so many roles across the company that are focused on R&D and building the commercial side that are, if you don't do this efficiently, they could be really weighed down on their time just trying to do compliance, just trying to do privacy. So if we have that amazing 1-2 punch of a good specialist, a good tool, and we're able to just hand people a really good starting point to finish off, that becomes something that they feel really good about completing, knowing that it's going to live on forever, and that it actually makes a difference when the market looks at us and says, how serious are you? Can you continue to scale with me? Are you going to be a risk for my privacy program? In the end, as long as we can say, no, we're not a risk. No, we're not a risk. Here's all the proof points. It really helps.
That's great. What really stands out to me throughout all of this, Nick, is how, a lot of people could assume what you just mentioned, it comes up towards that, at the later stages. But you've been really consistent throughout every stage to keep, privacy a priority. And I didn't feel like there's been any of these stages where you felt like, we are here now, the team has expanded, we have these tools, let's do something differently. Meaning that really, and as we jump into the conclusions, compliance and privacy are ongoing commitments from day, not one, day zero. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, I can't imagine what happens if you forget about it and it becomes a company killer. I mean, you're taking a big risk starting a company in the first place, but it's one of those things that will absolutely stunt your growth if you don't do it.
Yeah, it makes sense. Another thing that I took is, the right software solutions empower efficient and effective compliance management, finding that right tool. And as you mentioned, cut through the noise and getting to something that actually works to, where you are now. There's a lot of tools out there, obviously, and, an enterprise company could do things differently than a startup. And you have to find the right methods, in there that matches, where you are in your data journey and startup journey. And another thing that stood out to me is, striking that balance, with compliance and business, and keeping, you've kept hammering on it, keeping compliance, essential. And, if you need sustainable access and not just chaotic and things where you would be jumping into a market you don't understand correctly, as you kept saying it's a company killer. That definitely is one of the main points that I've gotten here. Any other takeaways or anything that you'd like to share with that, everybody hearing us today?
I mean, one of the things that I love the most about being a part of this scale-up journey is that when it all comes down to it, everything that we do in operations, we're trying to just have those amazing customer moments, those moments where they're happy with the value they get, and we have a really strong support channel. And the way that we handle any questions that come up about any issue, including privacy, is so professional and is such a trust builder that you can't have in your go-to-market approach. You have a BDR handing off to an AE solution specialist. It's those support moments when they say, hey, what about this privacy issue? I was concerned about this. Having that ready to be answered by anybody on your support team to say, here's how we handle this is a really beautiful moment in building customer trust.
I love it. Congratulations, really, Nick. You've done something amazing. Congratulations to everybody at Ardoq. We're very proud to have you as a customer. The advice that you've given is actually, resonates with me as, a leader of even marketing. We deal with a lot of personal data, and how do you build those relationships as MineOS grows. So I really hope it's been beneficial to everybody that hears us. I trust that it is. Thank you for everybody that joined us today. Nick, thank you so much for putting the time here and sharing incredible advice and insights from your own journey.
Happy to share. Thanks, everyone.
Very good. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. For any other more information you'd like to know more about us, you can visit us at mineos.ai. Have a great day. Thank you.